I'm an entertainment designer who's also a lifelong car addict, science nerd, sci-fi geek, and general anything mechanical enthusiast. I thought I would turn my imagination into a YouTube channel and share it with the world. Come along and explore all kinds of crazy from my notebooks, sketchbooks, and even my mind. Welcome to Design Imaginarium. Welcome back to Design Imaginarium. In the last video, the first video ever published on the channel, we went through the process of designing the aerial element from start to finish. It was a pretty involved process, and if you haven't seen that video, you should really watch that one first. The link is in the description. Oh, and in case you didn't see this in the first video, today we're going to go through the process of creating a 1/5 scale finished clay model of the aerial element. Automotive clay modeling is a pretty specialized art, and I've seen a few tutorials on how to do this on YouTube, but they're from channels that emphasize the well-lit, almost pornographic beauty of sculpting clay. My video is not going to be like that. My video is going to be poorly lit, full of primer sanding dust, and covered in paint stains. I only have old phone cam images from when I built this model, so this video is going to be a slideshow, and an aesthetically challenged one at that. I'm going to go into significant detail on this build process. Some might say excruciating detail. So this video might not be for everyone, but if you ever wanted to learn step by step how to build one of these clay design models, this is your tutorial. The first thing to discuss is what tools do you need? Or, if you don't care what tools it takes to build these models and you just want to see how this is done, feel free to skip ahead to about the 3-minute 20 mark. Alright, to get started, you're going to need a build board. This is just a big piece of MDF with a piece of masonite attached to the top and given a grid with a Sharpie to assist with symmetry. Once you build this, you cover with shellac to create a clay-proof surface. You're going to need a Surform, and a rasp like this will briefly be useful as well. The most important tools you'll need are these steels. In our first clay class, we made these out of thin spring steel. The second most important thing you'll need are these clay tools. There's no need to be too precious with any of these tools because by the second day, they're all going to look like this. You're also going to need a whetstone to keep the edges of those steels crisp, and whetstone cleaning fluid will also be useful. You'll need some easy sand for when you're prepping for painting. You'll need a contour gauge as well for symmetry, but you'll probably find that these are no good because they're too stiff such that they'll damage the clay if you use them. So I made this one myself, which is tight enough to be accurate, but loose enough not to damage the model when I use it. When you get to the point of painting the model, you'll need an HVLP gun like this, and a paint booth with compressed air, even if the paint booth is homemade. You'll also need various cups and strainers. Alright, let's get started. The first thing you're going to need if you want to build a model of your car design is an orthographic drawing, like this. I went through the sketching process that gets you to the point of being able to create one of these in the previous video. The way we built models in my transportation design program was they always started as a flat piece of plywood that we called a skateboard. You take that skateboard and you epoxy a big hunk of styrofoam to it. Then you would take printed profiles of your car's top, side, and end-on view, and you would cut the styrofoam to that pattern on a bandsaw, although a regular wood saw would work just fine as well. You do this to make the styrofoam fit inside the boundaries of the car. The reason to do this is because clay is both heavy and expensive, so you want the interior to just be cheap, light styrofoam. If we were optimizing this, the idea would be to leave just enough space between the styrofoam and the surface of the model that you can add and remove clay in order to experiment with the shape and the form. I aimed to cut the styrofoam down to about 1/2 inch or a little more than 1 centimeter below the vehicle surface. Now you have a very squarish version of your car where the corners undoubtedly stick out past the model's final surface. So you have to reduce all those corners to rounded shapes that will be contained within the exterior dimensions of the final model. This is done with a Surform, or a rasp, or maybe even a handsaw. Once you've got the shape cut down so it's a smaller volume than the final model everywhere, The next thing you do is take a power drill with a nice big bit in it, and you attack the model like a slasher movie to create all these holes. The reason you do that is because you need to give the clay something physical to adhere to. It needs to be able to bite into the styrofoam because it doesn't inherently stick to styrofoam, so it needs some physical tooth to which it can adhere. But the styrofoam also doesn't have a good interaction with the clay, so you have to chemically isolate the styrofoam from the clay, and for that you use shellac. This is just regular hardware store shellac, and you cover the entire model with it. Then you start adding clay. You can see I'm using some foam core profiles there that are the exact profile of the car to check that I'm getting enough clay on for now. If you look closely, you can see that the profiles are keyed into the edge of the checkerboard masonite. Now we jump forward a bit, and you can see that I've worked this top side pretty thoroughly, and it's looking quite a bit better. This is the other side you can see here. I've done a lot less work over here. You can also see that I'm using a bridge tool that I borrowed from another student, which you can use to check the accuracy of each side of the model for symmetry. I actually didn't use this tool as much as I thought I would, but it was nice to have it occasionally. One important thing to note is that when you finish an area, you want to tape over the finished part because that way it preserves the surface. You're not going to bump it or nick it when you're working on the surface right next to it. You'll see tape used in this way all throughout this build. I'm using another foam core profile of the model down the center line to make sure that the model is exactly what the ortho represents. Again, you can see the template is keyed into the masonite. You can see here that it's starting to look symmetrical. For this model, I 3D printed some parts, and this is my lower nose and front wings coming out of the 3D printer. There's the completed nose piece next to the car. If you see that cone on the bottom, that's a height registration aid that I built into the model that would index the part at the correct height off the ground, so I could just set the part on the building base and it would automatically be at the right level. I made them a little bit too easy to snap off though, because many of them came off prematurely and had to be glued back on. I had to cut away some of the existing nose material to make room for inserting the 3D printed nose. Here I've got a printout of the orthographic drawing at 1/5 scale to help me properly place the front nose piece. You can see it's all lined up in this picture. The next step was to prime and sand the part before it gets permanently attached to the model. I've removed just enough material so that the hollowed out nose piece could fit on the model, and then I epoxy it in. But there was still some void and empty space in there, so what I did was I protected the clay portion of the model with saran wrap, and then put a tiny bit of expanding foam to fill the void so it would be firmly held. Gotta be careful with that expanding foam though. The expansion is really powerful, it could easily tear the model apart if you're not careful. Now you can see it's attached in place pretty cleanly. The model's looking pretty good from the top. At this point, I turned the model over to ensure that the point at the bottom of the model where the 3D print met the model was securely fastened. As long as it was upside down, I painted the blackout behind the radiator intake as well. I should mention that turning a model over is a fairly involved process fraught with danger. It's hard to see, but the model is actually resting on a big foam pad so it doesn't get damaged. But that foam pad has been used at this school for 20 years, so it's nasty and covered with 2 decades of previous students' clay model funk. That's why you put down this moisture impermeable piece of butcher paper between the cushion and your model. And you can't have the model moving around, so you strap it down with a ratchet strap. But you can't let the strap touch any part of your model other than the plywood, so you have to put a wide piece of wood at the top, well, the bottom of the model, to hold the strap away from the clay. The model is decently heavy at this point as well, so turning it over is not for the faint of heart. Now what I'm doing here is sawing off the rear bottom of the styrofoam and even some of the plywood because my rear diffuser in cut is so deep that I need that material gone to make room for the diffuser channel. I'm doing this with a good old-fashioned carpentry saw. I should probably mention at this point that sometimes we're still working in the studio at 10 o'clock on a Friday night. What you can see here, though, is the relatively clean cut of the bottom rear going right through the plywood, as well as the foam core templates on either side, showing where the top of the diffuser tunnel should be. These are 2 3D printed pieces for the side of the vehicle. Again, you can see my height registration cones were not robust enough. The pieces you just saw are on the left in this picture, and the other piece on the right is a separate one because the 3D printer bed wasn't big enough to print the part as one piece. You can see they've been stitched together with epoxy and popsicle sticks, and you can see the height registration cones that have been glued back on these parts as well. Here are the 3D printed rear wings and lower diffuser surface. The parts came out standard with broken height cones. This is the two side pieces that have been attached together, primed and sanded and mocked up in place. This is the rear wings mocked up on the rear sides of the model. They're not attached, they're just held there with tape right now. This is the first time that I actually had the rear wings in the right place and the body side nearly in the right place. With those stand-in wheels, it actually looks like a car now. From the rear, you can see the lower diffuser element also placed in the correct position. Remember when I said that expanding foam is really strong? As in, sometimes it's used to lift sunken concrete and the ground strong. Those are two 20 or 30 pound weights that I put next to the body panel before I sprayed a little foam in there to fill any voids. And the foam was so powerful, it pushed the weights out of position. So I had to carve out the foam and do it again with less foam. Here's the left side body successfully attached to the model and integrated into the clay. I had to turn the model upside down again to make sure that the sides were properly secured and any void between the styrofoam and the 3D printed sides was adequately filled to prevent any weaknesses from allowing a side of the model to cave in. If you look closely, you can see the bottom of the model is a mess of plywood, styrofoam, expanding foam, clay, and epoxy to secure everything together. Here I'm trying some Mad Max derivatives of my model. Here's the other side successfully attached and integrated into the model. Next thing is that I decided these side elements weren't integrated adequately into the side surface of the model, so I changed that with clay. These are the two areas of the 3D print that I ended up modifying with clay. That brings up a larger point of using 3D printed parts. It sure can save a lot of time. But to the extent that a clay model is a tool where you can experiment with surfaces and add and subtract material, 3D printing is actually quite limiting in that respect. You can always add clay to a 3D printed piece, but if you want to take material away, that's going to be a very labor-intensive and somewhat destructive act. Now it was time to attach the rear wings, and I knew that was going to be a delicate proposition because unlike the sides or the nose piece, where there was a huge amount of surface area for the 3D printed part to attach to the model, there was barely any surface area to accommodate that in the rear wings. I actually modeled those wings with small holes in the upper surfaces that could accept wire pins. So I inserted the pins into the clay and then inserted the part onto the pins. The lower element had pinholes as well. I just didn't get a photograph of attaching those. Now here you can see the model is on a painting stand where it will be sealed, primed, and then painted. The first thing you do is spray the model with a product called BIN. This is a shellac-based sealer that serves to chemically isolate the clay from the primer you're about to put on the model. And when you spray it on, it turns your model completely white. Then you spray the whole model with polyester primer surfacer. We used Evercoat. Those black splotches you see on the model is what's called a guide coat. After you prime it, you apply a thin layer of spray paint, any color, and then when you sand, you know you sanded the entire surface once all the guide coat is no longer visible. Once the guide coat is on, you spend a very long time sanding with 180 grit sandpaper. Now, if you see these pictures with the polka dots all over the model, those are places where I sanded to the primer, so I had to add more by hand to build the area back up again. Now I've got the model upside down again, and it's because I'm finishing the inside of the diffuser channel. No one will ever see this surface, but what can I say? I'm a perfectionist. The rough outside edges and the area in the middle with the green tape are where the diffuser attaches to the model. This is the point where I finally finished with this stage of sanding. If you look closely, you can see there are plenty of blemishes on it. And consequently, my reward for all this hard work was to respray it with another coat of primer and do it all over again. I wanted to paint the model yellow with the windscreen sort of a metallic silver gray. This is how I chose what colors to use. I ended up using a Maserati yellow for the main body, a Honda silver metallic for the windshield area, and a Mazda Magnum gray color for the darker wheel covers and rear lower body, the diffuser, and the windshield fritz. Building models and priming and sanding is just murder on your hands. I put these elongated oval tape circles you see here on the model because they're surrounding areas where I broke through the primer or where there was some fault in the application of the primer that needed to be fixed. You can see here that the layers of BIN and primer have actually delaminated from the model somehow here. I don't know how that happened, but you fix that by slicing the area out with an X-Acto knife and then filling it with Easy Sand. Then you sand the Easy Sand down to the level of the surrounding body, and the tape around the Easy Sand application helps keep you from sanding too far down. For some reason, the bin and primer did not take to those values in my model, and when I cut out one bad area, it just led me to realize that the damaged portion was longer than I initially thought. I kept putting an easy sand in until I had basically done the entire trough on both sides and that spot on the right as well. I still don't know why those values didn't take to the surfacing process. These are my 3D printed tires, and you can see a few of the wheels at the top of the frame. Here's wheels, tires, wheel covers, and the lower diffuser all being primed and sanded. The last step before painting is to clean it with solvent by wiping the solvent on with one clean cloth and then wiping it off with another clean cloth. Don't use paper towels or anything with paper fibers in it to do this. The last step is to wipe the model in the paint booth with a tack cloth. Now, you want to use a color and clear coat that's from the same manufacturer. We use PPG Ditzler, but every major paint manufacturer sells an equivalent system. This is the model now fully sanded, wiped, tack cloth, and ready for paint. The lower area is taped off because that's going to be a different color. Before painting the car yellow though, first I painted it white because that's going to make the yellow really pop in a way that it wouldn't if I was painting over gray primer. Then the first color goes on. The next step is to tape off the areas I want to stay yellow and expose the whole greenhouse area to be painted metallic silver. This is the silver now applied. This is now the model taped in preparation for painting the windshield frets. It's hard to tell with all the layers of paint and tape what's happening here, but this is the area that's going to be painted. Here's the darker gray applied. Now let me tell you that this stage where you start peeling off the tape and seeing the properly applied paint job is right up there with falling in love in terms of gratification. Now here you can see that the clear coat has been applied to all of these upper portions of the model. The rear bottom is still under tape though. Now the tape is off the lower rear part of the model in preparation for painting that area. And you can see that the brake calipers below have also been painted the same yellow body color. Now I do the exact opposite process where I tape up all the upper finished parts of the model and leave just the lower rear and body exposed to be painted. Here's a primed and sanded wheel cover on top of a primed and unsanded tire and wheel. Here's the rear bottom of the model painted. And here's the model with the diffuser tray dry fitted. Now I've got finished rear wheel covers and primed wheels and tires that still need to be sanded, and I'm waiting for the front wheel covers to come off the 3D printer. Making progress. I've got sanded and painted tires, and primed and sanded wheels and front wheel covers. The yellow is looking a bit dull because I've been sanding the clear coat in preparation for polishing. Now I'm putting the brakes together. These parts are all just laser cut acrylic. The discs are painted with spray paint, and the calipers were painted along with the body in the same yellow color so they match. The suspension pieces are just airfoil shaped aluminum tube stock. You can get it at any hobby store. It's meant for radio control airplanes. I made this foam core jig to ensure that when I made the suspension, it would be level and symmetric from left to right. Once I had the suspension pieces cut out, I epoxied them together and then used easy sand on the exterior to blend the seams. Above, you're looking at the inside of the wheel covers. You can see how the brakes fit together from the back side. You can also see I'm just using foam core as spacers to get the positioning right. They look a lot better from the front. This is the bottom of the nose that functions as a splitter. It's just a cut and painted piece of styrene. This is how I attach the suspension to the front of the car. I made sure to use the same trick I did with the rear wings and put wire pins in the model and in the suspension. You can see that there's little black stickers on the body there to make it look like the suspension comes out of the hole in the bodywork. And drum roll please. Now the model's done. And this is what my disaster of a work area looked like by the end. This is the model on display. I was always very appreciative that they put me right in front of the pencil sharpener. Here's my presentation setup. Well, you've seen still images of the model in the classroom. Let's take a more dramatic look at it. And here are some clearer studio shots of the 1/5 scale aerial element clay model. If you'd like to help me keep making these videos, please consider visiting my Patreon page, where you can learn more about what it takes to make these videos and create these designs. If you like what you saw today, feel free to like and subscribe and let me know what you liked best about the video in the comments. If you didn't like what you saw today, feel free to dislike and subscribe so you can see how rotten the next video is, and also feel free to tell me how much I suck in the comments below.